Holden Made.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Holden Made Podcast. I'm Jeremy Holden, your host for the Holden Made Podcast. This is a podcast about creativity, about creative processes, and anything else that piques my interest. I look forward to interviewing people about their careers, about their creativity, and about their lives in general. For this episode, we welcome Lindsey Berkebile and her special guest, Potato. Lindsey is a stop motion animator and a studio owner over at Planet Super Studios in Portland, Oregon. Let's take a listen and see what she can share with us. Well, hello, everybody. I want to welcome my guest. I'm not going to butcher her name, so please, Lindsey, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. My name is Lindsey Berkebile, and I am the co-owner of Planet Super Studios, which is a stop motion. We do a little bit of 2D now, animation house that mostly does commercial work and short form stuff. But I've been a stop motion animator for, oh gosh, over 15 years now, I guess.
That's absolutely wonderful. I am kind of jealous because I love animation. We've talked about this. I love animation. I backdoored my way into animation just through graphic design and motion graphics. Motion graphics, animation has a lot of tied together. So does film and motion graphics, etc. But my heart has always been with animation. And when I finally get the crowbar to open my wallet up and go back and get a graduate's degree, it will be in animation most likely. So, I mean, it's right there. And I can't thank you enough for being here. And I really appreciate you talking with us. The very first thing I want to start off with is, when did you find out you wanted to be in a creative field? Were you a child? Did you find this out in high school? Where did it all start?
You know, this is actually an interesting question. So I grew up in a really small town where the only jobs that you're really told as a kid that you can be are like farmer, doctor, bank teller, maybe business owner, stuff like that, construction worker. Also, that's Potato. You'll see him milling around in the background.
Hello, Potato.
He's like, I know. And it sounds still ridiculous to this day, but we did have, like, in my high school, we had like one art class. We had band, and that was kind of it. And I did really like art, but I'm a very type A personality and also have anxiety even as a kid. And so I was actually someone who was very concerned about my future because I grew up in the age where they tell you, if you don't know what you're going to do for the rest of your life, you will die. And you're like, as you know, you're like 12 and you're like, I don't know what I want to be. And I was watching Fuse TV, which was newer in high school, and they actually showed music videos. And I still am, but I'm very into the music scene as a kid. And I was watching this one music video. It was actually the band Brand New, and it was their video Sick Transit Glory, which is actually directed by Mark Webb, who has gone on to do features. But it was the first music video I ever saw that was more like a short film. And up until that point, it was always like the band's playing and there might be like, a flash, and then maybe there's like a sad woman looking out the window, which is like fine. But this one actually had a story and it was like a short film. And it like blew my mind. And I thought for the first time in my life, someone gets paid to do this. And that might sound simple to some people who maybe like grew up in different areas, but like this was wild. Like wild to me. I was in 10th grade. I remember where I was sitting and I was just like, there is no reason why that couldn't be me. Like, this person who got paid to do this had to have started somewhere. And I was like, and now this is probably what they do for money. And I was like, I could do this. And I told my parents, and I'm like my mom does creative stuff, but I'm like the artist of the family. So this is new to them. And I am very grateful that they found like a little local film school, not film school, sorry, film camp for high schoolers.
Got it.
I grew up in Pennsylvania, and it was
Mhm.
on Penn State's campus, and basically the film students of Penn State like helped put on this camp, and they signed me up for it, and basically to be like, if you really want to do this, you should probably like experience it before you like decide you want to go to film school. And I loved it. Like I've never been so obsessed with something. It's like all I wanted to do. And so right then I was like, let's look at film schools. And my mom is awesome. She literally sat down and was like, I don't know anything about, looking for film schools or even like looking for colleges because I'm the only person in my family who didn't go to Penn State. But she was like, let's figure this out together. And so we did, I don't know, just started asking everyone, like, what's a good film school? And, trying to look up in books. Because I mean, like, the internet was there, but we didn't like heavily use it as much as we do now. And so, like, literally, I remember going to the library and getting this huge book that was just like all about different colleges that exist, and they update it every year. And just like going through it and looking at film programs and then trying to get resources on like if we liked them. And um, so I did not go to school for animation technically, actually. I went to
Yeah.
school for live action filmmaking. Um, and animation happened later. There's like an asterisk there because I kind of
Yeah.
graduated doing both, but not really. Um, it was a hold on, I have to correct my puppy.
Oh,
We
no
don't chew
worries, no
that.
worries.
We don't chew that. I know that looks fun to chew, but we just don't. Here, have a puzzle toy. I created puzzle toys just for this meeting.
Oh, that is beautiful. I love it.
He's
Absolutely love
still
it.
he's still young, so he's
How old is,
learning.
I know we're getting distracted, but how young is Potato, or how old is Potato?
He's 11 months, so he's
Oh, he's
almost yeah, he's almost a year, and he's in his full teenage defiant um
and
thing, but he's a good boy.
that's so much fun era to be in, and I appreciate you expanding on where you came from with this, especially since you grew up in a small town. You
Yeah.
uh, had this experience of watching music videos, which many people in different generations have that experience and decide, okay, I love what's being created. This is an inspiration for me. The fact that something gripped you in that particular video that was in the storytelling, not the visuals necessarily, but how everything worked together to create an overall arc. I'm not gonna lie to you, I was obsessed with music videos from a young age, and I'm a little older than you. So in the '90s, when I was able to start watching MTV, it was kind of this mind blowing thing to see the old videos from the '80s, which I was too young to really understand or even conceive what's happening, and watch everything go from new wave sound and the odd new digital items that they were bringing into the stories just to kind of make a video, because artists back then, well, they're making music. The music is what they focused on. They had to bring in other creatives to collaborate and create the visuals because they maybe didn't have that concept, or they maybe didn't work on that. And MTV infused all those music videos and the behind the scenes of how to make those inspired me when I was in high school as well. And I can tell you, I had this big plan from senior year to storyboard an idea, send a handwritten letter with the storyboard to whoever I can't remember who it is now, but they directed Pink in one of her music videos. And I went, this is the guy I want to work with. And by the end of senior year, I remember thinking to myself, how do I get his address? How do I track him down? And I paused, like that was it. I'm like, oh, because at the time the internet was not in my house. My family, I'm going to confess something. I'm a graphic designer. I do digital media. I do all this great stuff. I didn't have the internet in my house until 2009, because what didn't occur to me that I needed it in my home to do stuff like search for the address of the person I wanted to work with. But it happens. We move on, and it's always been an inspiration to me to see that kind of tie back in. And I'm interested. What school did you end up going to? I forget if you covered that already. Forgive me if we're backtracking.
I didn't. Mm-mm.
Okay, so when it comes to college, what before you tell us what college you went into, what program, how you ended up into that program, how did you decide college was right for you? Because there's many artists who decide college wasn't right for them and they go and make their own way. And I feel like a lot of what we've talked about before this interview, you've got a lot of self-taught knowledge coming into animation. Isn't that correct? Or
Yes.
self-explored, I guess is the way it would be stated.
Yeah, my way into the industry, I feel like is pretty different. But also, the more people I meet in our industry, and I'm sure you've experienced this, it's like I feel like there is a little bit of a more typical way that people get in now, typical, but then there's so many people, especially I find the animators who are senior to me, it is more common to get into this industry in the weirdest ways. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, I could go on for that. Do you want me to wait? I don't want to get distracted. Do you want me to talk about college and then?
I'm happy to take this in whatever direction. So let's
I know
start
I'm
off
like, wait,
with. Yep,
where are we going?
I have the same problem. I left that was a very wide open question. I think we should start off with how did you decide college was right for you,
Yes.
and what program did you end up going into since it wasn't directly related to animation as you just mentioned?
Yeah, which it kind of was. So, I wanted to get into RIT, Rochester Institute. Uh, wait, so Rochester Institute of Technology. Yes, I went there, and I do remember it. You know, uh, being completely honest, the reason why, and I feel like this was the right choice for me. But it's interesting that, I say that now because again, you have to remember that like younger Lindsay was very type A personality, and I was actually very much a rule follower. I really I've done a lot of work on myself. I'm a little bit of a different person now, but I really wanted to do everything right. And again, I was a little bit anxious, so that's why it's like I was like, thinking about the future, and I was like, I really want to set myself up for success in the future, and make sure that um I'm not homeless, and I have a pretty decent career, and et cetera, et cetera. And the way that I was told as a kid, your whole life is you graduate from high school and you go to college and then you graduate and you get a job. Um, and also my parents talked a lot about like they had a really positive college experience, and I grew up hearing all of their happy memories from their college experience. Like to the point that I could spit them all out now, because it's one of those where you've heard the stories over and over again. But I, as a kid, always dreamed of going to college because my parents made it sound like so much fun.
Yeah,
And I'll be honest, that actually was my college experience. It was really fun. I not everyone has this experience. I thrived in college. You have to understand though, like I was heavily, heavily, heavily bullied in high school. Like
um,
it was pretty traumatic. I used to try and fake sick so I wouldn't have to go because I was so scared. And that's where a lot of my anxiety came from. And I was beat up. Like, I mean, it was my parents looked at trying to switch me schools, but there's no privates, like there's nowhere for me to go. Again, I grew up in a really small town. Like there isn't private schools. It's either you go to public school or you're homeschooled. And they tried to maybe like figure out if they could change their address so I could go to a different public school. Like it anyways, I'm just saying that it was really bad. So for me, college was a way for me to like almost start over because I never really felt like I had much of a chance because it's like whenever you become the kid that's bullied in high school, it just becomes like you're that kid, and it doesn't really have anything to do with you. I was the weird emo kid who was really into punk rock and dressed different and listened to different music, and that just wasn't cool at all. And so Anyways, I that's why I really wanted to go to school. And also I didn't know how else to get the information that I needed to even have a film career because again, I didn't grow up knowing anyone who ever did that. Um I didn't like I again, I didn't even think that, and I didn't even know if it was an option back then. It's like now you can get so many resources online and even like watch videos and all this other stuff. That wasn't really quite the thing quite yet. It was like maybe it was, but that would still be pretty new.
Mm.
Like YouTube was just happening. I don't even think Vimeo existed yet.
Yeah, yeah.
Dragon Frame didn't exist when I started school. So, this all aging me. But so yeah, so I really wanted to go to RIT. They're one of actually the best film schools in the country. At the time that I went, they were ranked third in the country. And it was because Kodak is Kodak, the company.
Yep.
They're based in Rochester. And so all of their money funds RIT's film program. So they had the top of the line equipment, and a lot of money that was put in to, also entice good professors to, come away from the meccas of, where films are made. But also, it wasn't too far from New York City. I mean, it was like 5 hours, but, it's not too far that it wasn't like too crazy of a move for, some New York filmmakers to like make the jump to be a professor. And plus, they'd be able to not have to live in New York City and like make a different kind of living and educate. But anyways, yeah, I went for live action filmmaking and I never really thought much about animation, but the way that RIT's film program was set up is that it was the School of Film and Animation. And you cannot declare whether you are live action or animation till the end of your freshman year, which I think is awesome. I still don't know if their program is like that. Programs change, but at the time you had to basically take a fundamental class in everything. So you did like a live action fundamental like cinematography class and a story making class, and then you took a animation 101 class, which involves stop motion. Kind of like intro to CG animation, which was basically like a little bit of computer stuff.
Hmm.
But I don't actually know if we created any animation. It was more like here's an introduction to like even like coding was kind of involved with
Hmm.
that. And I don't think we had to do a drawing class. I'm trying to remember everything. Um, an editing class, like the whole gambit. And then at the end of your freshman year, you declare whether you are live action or animation and you branch off. And there's really not much interaction
Hmm.
usually between the animation and the live action students. You're still like in the same major, but you're like kind of not. And then from there, you even branch off further after your sophomore year and if you're in animation, you can basically declare if you're like CG or 2D or stop motion or maybe mixed media or whatever. And then in live action, it's like if you're sound design, editing, directing, writing, whatever it is. It's like it's called craft track. So you then choose
Got
your
it.
craft track. Um, yeah.
I mean that thank you so much for that detail, because that's important for people to understand that there was this relationship between the two and you had time to decide. I don't know many programs that give you that option. That was a very big deal, and I'm familiar with
Yeah.
Kodak. Based on all the cameras, for anyone who's watching this can see, I have probably 100 cameras on my shelf behind me. I understand how important Kodak was to that. And for them to be the ones pouring the money into this program, that's exceptional. That's great. And I one big thing I love to tell my students, because as at the time of this recording, I am a department chair and a college professor, as well as doing literally all the stuff that I want to keep relevant in graphic design, animation, photography. We need to look at who's teaching the class. And that's great that you had the option to know the school was one of the best, top 3 at the time, and you knew the people that were working there were specifically encouraged financially to come there, saying, hey, you may be able to teach in New York, you may be able to teach in LA, you may be able to teach at a studio in Vancouver. come here. Here's why. These are the students who are more passionate. These are the students who will benefit the most from that experience. And that kind of brings me to like an inspiration question before we get into more on your track. When you were in college versus high school, was there a professor that inspired you a lot? Was there an individual filmmaker? But you mentioned Mark Webb, if I remember correctly. Is there somebody else that was really an inspiration to you when you were
Oh,
going through this process? And we'll touch again on that after all this, because I'm going to ask you more inspiration questions. But who in
oh
college was kind of
yeah.
the big influence?
Oh man, I love this question because I'm very passionate about my answer. Um, I'd say if this person changed my life. I would not be sitting here today if it was not for the professor Tom Gasick, who I'm still great friends with today. Like, um, I I, I forget if this is going to be posted anywhere or anything, but man, if he ends up watching this, like, we need a phone call. I just, oh my gosh. Um, so Tom is why I got into animation. I would not be an animator because again, I was doing segue. This is also how I got into animation. Also, so killing a lot of birds with one story. But
Beautiful.
again, remember, Lindsey is type A and gets very set on something, is very goal oriented. And so I was like, I'm live action, like I'm gonna be a director and I'm gonna go and like make a career, doing this. And I was very focused. So even as a freshman, like I was doing all these things. And in the animation 101 class, because stop motion is actually a really good place to start learning animation because you don't need to like it's good for the fundamentals even if you want to do 2D or CG, because you don't have to like learn the program first or know how to draw. Um Obviously there's a bunch of other skills involved, but whatever. And so we did a lot of stop motion, and I was actually one of the best in the class. And my parents, who again, they're not involved in this world at all. I
Yeah.
remember my mom being like, wow, you're really good at this. And it's all you talk about is how much you love it and how, like, it's like the coolest thing you ever did. And I literally told my mom, I was like, Mom, stop. Because she was like, maybe you do this. And I was like, Mom, no one makes a living doing this. Do you want me to be homeless and in a gutter? I was like, it's maybe a hobby. And I was like, this is not a smart career choice for your daughter. Like, what are you doing? She's like, well, I don't know. You just really like it. And they're teaching it in college. And I was like, no, like, screw that. And I really smacked it away and kept going on my live action journey. And then, to make a long story short, uh, there's like a few electives that you get to take. And I was short one for I think it was the end of my sophomore year of college. And one of my friends was like, "Oh, I'm taking this frame by frame class." And I'm like, "What is that?" Because he was also in animation. Sorry, live action. And I was like, "That sounds like an animation thing." And he was like, "Well, it's open to live action students because," he's like, "it's like experimental animation and it involves a lot of live action stuff." And he was like, "It's really cool." And he was like, "And we could be in like groups together and work on projects." And I was like, all right. Basically what it was pixelation animation, which for those who don't know, it's stop motion with like full scale objects and people. So
Mm.
you're like doing stop motion animation but with people. And it was also like some cutout animation on a down shooter and some other like it's basically alternative stop motion. So it's non-character like experimental weird stuff.
Love it. Absolutely. This is the stuff that really draws me in now is seeing what people can do. And for those who don't know what a down shooter camera is, it's the camera that's above the scene you're building on, either a desk, glass sheets, something like that. And I love paper cutout animation. You've seen my motion graphics. It's a lot of goofy animations of me doing things because it's all paper cutout, scanned, and then turned into different things. But the fact that you got to play around with that for an entire semester in a class, that's just great.
It's fucking cool. Like, Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but it is.
Say whatever you want. Freedom of speech.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Because it is fucking cool. So Tom led that class, and oh my God, I've never in my entire existence of being on this planet have ever come across something that I've been more obsessed with. And it pissed me off. Because I was doing this class. I mean, I was like going up and beyond on every project because I just couldn't stop. I was doing pixelation stuff outside of class. I just like was eat, sleeping, and breathing it. And I remember sobbing in Tom's office at the end of that class, just being like, I'm so mad at you because you introduced me to this thing that I don't want to do anything else. Like, I just want to do this every fucking day. And I was like, no one makes a living doing this. Like, I'm not interested in just doing live action anymore. Like, I hate you. And he kind of laughed at me and said, if you stick with me, I will show you how. And to his credit, he absolutely did. From there, we created basically a custom program, which is something that RIT allows you to do if you make a case. It's almost like going to court. Like you sit down and you like make with evidence like a heavy case. And because I was not to toot my own horn, but I was like a 4.0 student and I always won all the grants and I went up and beyond. Like the professors really loved me. And I genuinely loved the classes in school, and it showed. And so I made a case being like, I want to be animation and live action hybrid from here on out. And I want to incorporate experimental animation into my live action films, which was my goal at the time. And we showed like the work I've already done that is going down this path. And Tom, talked about we were going to make custom classes where it was just him and I one-on-one, like learning certain things. He actually wrote a book on pixelation animation, which is one of the only ones that exist. So he's like specialist in that field, and as well as being a very renowned character animator. He's animated on many stop motion features and the things that, if you're familiar with any animation commercials like in the 90s and stuff like that, like he also did the Raisinets, like all over. And they let me do that. So from then on out, I kind of was taking animation and live action classes. If I could redo things knowing where life has taken me, I wish I would have just switched over to animation, but you don't know what you know till you know. And I really did think I was going to do more of a hybrid because that's where my passion was at the time. But I look back and I'm like, I really wish that I took a lot of the fundamental animation classes because I had to learn almost all of that stuff way later on my own. That I could have had maybe a head start of like learning and practicing that earlier, like character animation stuff and even drawing. Oh my gosh, I would kill to go back in time and take drawing class so much. We don't chew the plants.
I was gonna warn you, I think he's up to no good.
What are you doing? Okay.
Okay,
if you can't play with you need to play with your puzzle toy. So I graduated with like a dual major, sort of. Yeah. In that spirit, but I did not do character animation like at all. It was all pixelation. I don't even know what to call it, like experimental stop motion stuff. There were like
that's a
puppets.
Great way to describe it.
Yeah, like there were puppets, but they weren't quite character. It would be like a pie with spider legs and a ballerina comes up through the crust and spins around, but it's like in a live action environment where people are looking at it. and they're like, whoa, this pie came to life. It was like weird stuff like that. I'm gonna put my
Yeah.
puppy in his area.
No
You
problem.
you just want to be naughty. You can keep talking. I'll hear you. I'll be right
Absolutely.
back.
While you're taking care of Potato, I do want to establish that I'm absolutely grateful to hear that you had supportive parents. Your mother was extremely supportive at a point where you were like, no, I know I can't make a living off this. And she saw how good you were. She saw how passionate you were. She saw how much you talked about it and loved it. And your mother supported that choice even before you supported yourself. And that's wonderful to be able to have that. And then on top of that, you had a very deep kind of philosophical moment with yourself in school going, I can't, I want to do this, but I can't. And your instructor, your professor said, I will work with you and we will make it so you can do something with this. And you had that support there because I believe I don't believe anyone should ever be denied their dream. If they want to dream and follow a certain path to try and succeed at that, they need that shot. Because in life, we don't get many opportunities to follow what we want to do or love. And it was giving you a physical reaction at one point. And I absolutely appreciate that there was a support system there and they were helping you along. And that's kind of, I try to strive in my own life to help people along with that. So I really appreciate that it was there for you. My parents were very supportive of me going into the creative arts. I cannot thank them enough. Everyone has their own family dramas, but they never, ever doubted me. And my father, to this day, looks me in the eye every day and says, always remember, like whenever I'm having a doubtful moment, maybe there's an art show I want to go into and I don't think I'm qualified to get into. I have a parent who says, you're the best. You're the best at what you do. There is no one who does it better than you. Whether I believe it or not, he's believed it his whole life, and you have a mother who is telling you kind of that same thing. And you have a professor who's helping you along. And it led you down a path of finding something unique for yourself. I really think that's cool. And as you know, I already find your work very inspirational. I find your work to be very meaningful and have a lot of nuances and a lot of straightforward storytelling. And it's just cool that I'm hearing this. And I hope everybody else that hears this gets something from that.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for your compliments. That's very kind.
Absolutely. You'll find by the end of this interview, I've complimented you too many times. You'll hate me and never want to talk to me again.
Oh, great. I look forward to it.
That's the best way to go out. If no one's going to talk to me, it's because he was too damn nice.
He's so nice.
Yeah. but with all of this, it kind of leads us into one of the next big questions. What was your first big job? Like, what was your, not big job, what was your first job? Like, we all had to do something. For me, I used graphic design as an example. I started doing graphic design for local people when I was at the high school newspaper because I was the graphic editor for a year at the high school newspaper. So I'd do ads for people in town that they would, business cards, things like that. Maybe out of college there was, hey, I was the key grip on some movie, or maybe you were the production assistant to the production assistant. I don't know. Where did you start?
Okay, so when I guess I'll start like when I was in college. I did have to work, through college and pay for my own way. And I also, wanted a job that, again, because I'm anxious and always thinking about my future, that I could put on my resume so that it would like maybe help me get ahead after I graduated. And so there was an opportunity on campus to work in their like audio and visual department. And basically what that was is you're filming the live events for it to be like on the Jumbotron. So think like there's a graduation ceremony and you have the speaker who's like saying stuff and they have like, like a big projector on the side so that people way in the back can see who's on stage. Someone's filming that. Same thing with like the hockey games. We didn't have football, but we had hockey, and same thing. They wanted to film it for the local like campus like TV show where they show like sports events and stuff. And then also a part of RIT is what's called the NTID, which is the National Technical Institute of the Deaf. It's one of the number one hard of hearing and deaf schools in the country, if not the world. And so half of the students are hard of hearing or deaf. And as a result, which is amazing, there are endless resources to help accommodate these students with however they learn best. So, some people need interpreters, but not everyone who's hard of hearing or deaf understands sign language. That's a misconception often with people. So sometimes they need closed captions live um, while the class is going. And sometimes too, they need like classes filmed so that, maybe like there's also a student with a disability where they can't make it into class, or, they need closed captioning, but like being in class, it's like they can't quite see it. So we will film those things. We also film a lot of resources to help. I say we as if I still work there. This audiovisual thing also filmed a lot of resources in general to help educate students on campus about the NTID and also about deaf and hard hearing students. And so we would also film like interpreters doing like, a and and make like our own educational videos to help support like education of hearing students, so that they can also learn sign language and like other stuff like that. So there was like a lot of filming of like just random school stuff. And I did that. And it was pretty great. There were a lot of hours and they really like to employ obviously the film students on campus. And it paid more than minimum wage because it was a skilled job. So I did that in college. I also waitressed on top of that. And then whenever I graduated, I moved immediately to New York City and I worked as an instructor at the New York Film Academy.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, that sounds super fancy. It's mostly like a glorified camp counselor for high school students who, want to take like a film camp, and it pays like minimum wage. It's really nothing fancy. Actually, to be quite frank, I hated that job a lot. It hardly paid the bills. The hours were really odd, and sometimes like you would get like full-time hours one week and you're like, oh good, thank God. And then the next week you wouldn't hardly get any, and you're just like, I don't know how I'm gonna eat. So then after that, which is where I consider like my first real job,
Got it.
I was the administrative assistant to a production company called the Ebeling Group. And they basically repped like a whole bunch of animation directors, and then they mostly did like commercial stuff. They're kind of like I'm trying to think of like a company that is similar. Like, I mean, these companies are much bigger now, but like Buck Animation or PsyOp, Blink Inc., Riff Raff Films, it's kind of like what they did, but it was much smaller. And I was in their New York office, and that's actually a really pivotal job for me because, well, for many reasons. It led me to where I was in a very strange way, but it taught me a lot about producing because it was such a small company that I basically just worked one-on-one with the EP, even though I was an administrative assistant, which was just supposed to be like light bookkeeping and like being the receptionist. And like, if they were like, I don't know, book a flight, stuff like that. But because it was such a small company, I ended up basically being like more of a producer's assistant where they needed me to like help lay out budget sheets and track expenses and double check and even like set up certain Excel sheets for budgeting. It's scheduling and budget. What a fun new word. And I got to see how they do everything and behind the scenes, like the above the line scheduling and planning. And that was actually one of the most important things to date that I have learned, um, even outside of the skill sets of animation. I still use a lot of the systems and things that I learned from that
Mhm.
company, even though that company doesn't exist anymore, um, in my own work. And it taught me to be super organized and also understand how above the line stuff works, which is huge when you're below the line because it makes everything kind of make sense and it allows you to have some grace in a way for because I feel like it can often be like below the line people versus above the line people and they're just like you're evil, and
Mhm.
sometimes sometimes it's actually not that way. Sometimes their hands are really tied and they're like, "Oh, they always budget it wrong or they always schedule it wrong." And the truth is that I mean, I could go on and on about this, but
I
um
understand.
yeah, like sometimes clients demand things in the middle or, it was scheduled in such a way to make sure that the job happened and it wasn't extremely unrealistic at the time and it was either they schedule it this way or the job doesn't happen at all. Um
Mm.
and when you're put in that situation, I don't know, it's a hard place to be in because then it's like, okay, we'll be super rushed and the artist might be mad because they, have to do kind of like 30% of the quality that they can do. But it's like, well, there's no other jobs happening this year, and at least there were some jobs created, even if it's not the most polished or beautiful work you've ever done. And I don't know, there's not to say that, sometimes things are just budgeted and scheduled unrealistically and it comes down on below the line. And there's a bunch of issues there. But anyways, it's given me a whole broad view of things and understanding of how things work so that um I can decide myself whether I should really be mad or not.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
I understand that. And just for those who don't understand, above the line and below the line, we're talking about basically the people who handle the money, do the budgeting, manage everything is above the line. Below the line would be talking about people who are executing the project, correct? That's what we're referring to?
Yes, directors are technically above the line.
Got it.
Yeah. They're kind of the in between.
Mhm.
I would say. But yeah, above the line is like producers, EPs, um, uh, director is there, clients, yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a much clearer explanation than what I went with. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Um, as somebody who's done freelance work, I very rarely have that issue because everything I've done is freelance. It has not been. It's been for smaller companies, whether it's motion graphics or small animation. It's always me, maybe one other person that works with me, and the client. So we rarely have this budgeting fight issue. It's usually me yelling at myself, like, why did you spend 16 extra hours on something you're not getting paid for? It's always that kind of personal moment where I'm like, well, I'm not sending it out if it's not right, which is a whole different issue. We don't need to talk about that right now. But I appreciate you sharing that. And it kind of leads me into I'm interested in your creative process and clients you've worked with. Could you maybe tell us about how you approach a project? Maybe it's a personal one, maybe it's a client project, because you might have two different perspectives on personal work versus client. So, could you kind of give us a bit of a preview on your creative process, how you get started?
Yeah, I think it depends. I'm gonna go with client first. Um, I think it very much depends on the initial what the client presents to me first. So, every project is different. Like some clients kind of have a vision of a little bit of what they want. So, they might be, I'm just going to make up something. Let's say a client has a new product and they were like, we really wanted like this character to introduce our product and dance around. Um and we want it to be 30 seconds. And then it could even be even more specific, where they even have some boards or like a whole summary of like, we wanted it to basically open, and there's this character, and he does this and this, and we end on this title card, and and they basically want someone to execute it. My approach to that is different than more often than that, we might get like an invitation to pitch. So it'll be like, let's use a music video, for example. Let's say, I don't know, Lady Gaga is looking for a music video to this song. And they might send you the song, or maybe it's already out. Most of the time it's not out. And they'll be like, we're taking proposals for what this might be. And it's very open-ended. And they're basically probably collecting a number of pitches from different people that they're inviting to pitch, that they're already interested in. And you put together your idea and you submit it, and you might get it, you might not. And then you also like propose a budget. And usually they already have a schedule in mind. Like they'll be like, so it's the best if they say the budget and the schedule already before your pitch. That doesn't always happen. That is best case scenario, because that drives the creative a lot as well. If they're like, we have $50,000 for a 2.5, minute music video, and we need it in 4 months at this date. You're like, great. Because then you can pitch some idea that fits in that budget. What sucks is clients love to play the game of, they don't want to tell you what their budget is, even though they have one.
Yeah.
So then you have to play this game, which is always anxiety producing, of like, okay, well, I can pitch you a Ferrari that, it's still a car that's like, a ton of money, but it's awesome, or I can pitch you like, a really cool, I'm going to use my card, Jeep Renegade that is still cool, but it's, the Joe Schmo can have a Jeep Renegade, and it's still also a car. And so it's like, but which one can you afford? And if you pitch the wrong one, if you pitch them a Ferrari and they only had Jeep money,
yeah,
then they're going to pass you up. But if you pitch them the Jeep, but they were like expecting something as cool as the Ferrari because they can afford it, then you're also not going to get it. So it's like, I end up usually pitching kind of like a 3-tier system to the idea. That's what I do. I still feel like I'm flailing around and trying to figure out how to do this shit. But it'll be one idea, and I'll be like, here's the Ferrari price and what you can get, but it's the same idea. And it's like, also, here's the Jeep price, and it's still cool, but it's like not as fancy.
Yep.
And I try and approach it that way because I hate playing that game. But with the open-ended ones, my creative process, man, that's a good question. It's so different. I know for sure the way I operate as a creative, also because I'm an introvert and I need a lot of time to think, is I have to sit alone for a while. And I actually consume a ton of animation during that time. And I'm on Pinterest a lot. And I basically, I'm either looking at pictures of the product or I'm listening to the music, and I'm like consuming a bunch of stuff, and I kind of wait, and it always happens though, I kind of wait for something to inspire me. Or I also have this Rolodex of a whole bunch of stuff I want to do, or experiment with, and I kind of see if this fits with like any of the stuff that I already kind of want to do. It's almost like finding someone to pay for the shit I already want to do.
Yeah.
And be like, oh, actually, this one idea that I've really wanted to do fits really well with this ad campaign, and I'm going to pitch that. Once I start to formulate an idea, I'll start brainstorming and bringing it into my team.
Mhm.
a little bit more, and um, I start adjusting the idea with my team because, again, I'm not an expert in VFX, and I'm not an expert in fabrication, and I'm not an expert in cinematography, but my people are. And so it would be stupid for me not to, the moment I start to formulate an idea, bring people in and be like, with your perspectives of your specific area of expertise, like, what do you want to do with this project? Like, what inspires you from this? What do you want to adjust? Or maybe you have an idea, or maybe like Jason really wants to do this really cool lighting effect and this like new thing. And he was like, oh my gosh, this would be the perfect opportunity. And it pluses it up from there. And it also gets your team excited to do the project, because if we're all doing something that we're kind of stoked about in it, like, that's whenever the best work happens. It's not just about the director and their idea. Like, it's not. It's a collaborative process, and the best work comes from collaboration because we all can't be experts in the same area.
Yeah.
There's some people who are. I am not. Like, I actually do wish that I was a little bit more of an expert in some other areas, but I'm not. And I would actually just rather work with people who are super passionate about, um, like I said, like VFX or 2D animation or fabrication, because I only have so many years in my life to perfect, certain skill sets. And I'm someone who would rather spend my whole life like perfecting, like, two or three skill sets and becoming really good at that, and
Mhm.
then relying on my team, um, who also have done that to like form the perfect project.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
because I don't enjoy doing it all. I don't. Like,
Yeah.
I honestly would hate to probably do After Effects. Like, I also, all the equipment with lighting, it, I don't know, overwhelms me. And stuff like that. So yeah, it's like, if that's not my ultimate joy, then it's okay for me to, obviously I know how to do it. And I think that's important for directors to understand their team's process, and therefore be able to make their lives easier, communicate better to them, and also not pitch stuff that is outside of limitations or, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but I won't be I know I won't be as much of an expert on it as them. I don't know if this makes any, if I
Oh,
even answered the question. I just feel
you
like I'm
did
going
answer the
on and on
question.
and on and on.
No, no, you answered the question in the best detail possible, because
Oh,
you
good.
led you led right into, from how you deal with a pitch, you led into the creative process, and then you're talking about who you're working with to execute the project. Now, with that being said, I have to say I'm from the as a freelancer, I've done a lot of in-house work, and I've done a lot of freelance work. As a freelancer, when I was in school, we were taught do everything,
Yeah.
be a jack of all trades, master them all. You need to be good at all of it. And as a graphic designer, we need to know motion graphics. We need to know photography. We need to understand storytelling. We need to understand a little bit of web design and coding. I'm terrible with language. I have a processing disorder. I have ADHD. I also have something that's comparable to dyslexia. So learning coding is never an option. I've been trying to learn it for 20 years, and I can't. I can make colored tables, and I can put an image into code. Yay! 20 years to get that far. I'm not an expert in that, and I never will be. I need to outsource that skill to someone else. Lighting. I'm a photographer, and I love natural light. I love ring lights because they make things so easy. The problem is I'm not an expert in lighting anything other than a small product. If we're talking about full studio lighting, I am experimenting with all the ways to get them near a window. That's one of my shortfalls. No matter how much I've studied lighting, I'm still not the expert in that. And I understand where you're coming from that. And as a current instructor, I really believe the need for niching down is important, because we have unrealistic expectations in the work environment where an employer wants you to have, and at the time of this recording, this is very relevant, they want you to be graphic designer, social media expert, see it what is it? Search engine optimization. They want you to have 15 years experience with social media. Social media hasn't even been around for 15 years at this point. I'm not counting MySpace. No matter how wonderful it was, I'm not counting it.
No.
Yeah, and it's one of these situations where get those 2 or 3 skills. Make sure that you're passionate about it. Make sure you love what you do. That's where I believe you and I cross in and join up. We could both throw a drink back to that if I drank. But it's one of those moments like you need to be passionate about what you do. You need to like what you do because you're going to do this most likely for a long time, whether it's the rest of your life, 10 years, if you're going to school for it, or if you're enjoying it at the time you've learned it. It's important that you enjoy it, and it's important to be able to work with others. And again, from my point of view, you've said everything I would say on that topic, and I really appreciate you diving in there and giving such a good answer. And again, it's just me. I've been around for a while, and I have seen what happens with this pitch. And before we move on to a couple of other questions, and I know we're running a little short on time. I told you about an hour for this. Where the one thing about the pitch, there's this big school of thought that's come in the last 7 years about we don't pitch anymore. We give you one idea, you come to us. How do you feel about that when it comes to the animation industry or just the creative industry in general? Because a lot of designers I know, they don't pitch anymore. They have stopped pitching. They go to the client and they say, if you want to work with me, here's what I can offer. And here's what it's going to cost. Have a nice day. Let me know. Do you feel that is still just an evolution? Do you feel that's even relevant in film industry, animation? Or do you think it's actually a hindrance to people who aren't willing to pitch? Because I've been discussing it with friends. I'm very interested to see where this goes.
So I this is the first time I've heard of something like this. So you mean like yeah, wait, I'm so
So I'll
confused.
try
How do you not pitch?
So,
Like,
so
how do you do this?
that's the slight difference I think with our fields where we'll have clients who are fishing for the right designer to work with, and they'll say, "Hey, can you pitch us 3 ideas?" Or they'll say, "Hey, can you pitch me, one good idea? You're in a pool of other designers." What's happening at this point is these people may not tell you the budget. They're trying to hear your idea. They might be trying to cherry pick your ideas and tell someone else what they want to. So they're going through designers and they're saying all of these things that sound like a very interesting job. And by the time they get the pitch, they're going to say, well, 15 people have come to me with this project now, or we came to 15 people with this project. I'm taking, designer 7. And we're going to figure it out from there. For what you're dealing with, it's a little bit more. It's a little different environment when you're pitching an idea to a studio or to a client who's doing commercial work.
Yeah, I find this really interesting. I grapple with the ethics and issues in my career and our industry with pitching because I do want to talk about this for a second, but you do not get paid to pitch. And that is
Absolutely.
a huge, I can say whatever I want. It's a huge fucking problem.
Yeah.
Because I spend sometimes 8 hours a day, like in between jobs, unpaid, putting together endless pitches. And it's not just typing up a little idea. It's like, because it's so competitive, you are making full color, like designed, like pitch documents that are pages long. And it is like the most professional thing you can present. Most of the time, if they're going to be picked up, you need storyboards. And it's like a lot of times too, for the ones we really want, you almost have to spend your own fucking money and you're not getting paid. It's like, and also my time, like my partner once, oh my gosh, my partner once said, he was like, I wonder how many hours, he's like, I think the amount of hours you put into pitching a year um exceeds how much work you do on projects during the year, like actual paid work. And he was like, if you were actually paid for your time pitching, he was like, you would make a pretty good living. Um, and I'm like, I cannot think about that because I will quit the industry. Like, it angers me to no end how but the other side of that is I don't want pitching to go away because it
Mhm.
also gives me the opportunity to get into places that normally I probably wouldn't have, because either I don't have work like that on my reel, which doesn't mean that I can't do it. It just
Yeah.
means that a client hasn't hired me yet, because you can get stuck in ruts. Like, if I keep doing toy commercials, I will only keep getting toy commercials, because then someone who wants a custom puppet will look at that and be like, well, you only do toy commercials.
Mhm.
And it's like, no, like, we have an entire puppet fabrication team who can do this, but it's like, that's my opportunity to pitch to them and be like, we can. Let me show you why. And wow them enough to then be able to then get that job and then also put that on our reel, which then it just keeps leveling you up in a way. Um, and the other thing is that clients and companies regularly get stuck in ruts where they just want to keep working, because it's familiar, and that's human nature. Just keep working with the three same people over and over and over again. And those three same people they're great. Like, I don't want to put
Mhm.
down these three people that are imaginary, but they might not necessarily be the best for every project. And you could maybe do something better, or introduce them to something different. And it's almost like an invitation to pitch is also an invitation to kind of keep things a little fresh and not just get stuck in ruts. Now, if they're only asking for the same pitches from like the same three people over and over again, it's like at some point, it's like, them, stop this.
Yeah.
um, like, now I work with some clients that I don't need to pitch. Like, they do just come to me sometimes and they're like, "No, okay, we just have a project, like, go do this." But we've already established that relationship. Um, or they do invite me to pitch, but it's only like with one other person. It's like the odds are much better. What I think should happen personally is, I
Mhm.
think if the industry can change, I gotta believe that it can, is that when you get an invitation to pitch, you are paid to pitch.
Yep.
And if you don't get it, at least your time that you put in to pitch that you were invited to is compensated. Um, that gets hard when you're starting to move into television and feature territory. It's
When
different. I don't think you can do that, um, unless Netflix, for some reason, which this does happen once in a while, they might invite this one creator because they're looking for something specific. We're actually doing something like that right now, but
okay.
like, for example, I'm just gonna make something up, but Netflix is like, let's say I've pitched to Netflix a fair amount of times, and actually oftentimes they can really like the creator, but the project just wasn't quite right. And so sometimes they'll start inviting you to pitch, and they'll be like, hey, we're kind of looking for a television show right now that's for ages uh 11 to 14, that's about dogs. And we were just curious if you had anything, and they might invite you to pitch in that way. That doesn't happen that often, but it does happen. I've heard of it
Mhm.
happening to people, uh at bigger companies too, like, like Shadow Machine, or I'm talking the stop motion world.
Yeah.
Um but if you have an idea and you put the work into it, it's like, then you shop it around. It's like, they can't really pay you for that. It's like that gets complicated. But the commercial world, absolutely, because almost always you are invited to pitch. It is rarely, in my people might have a different experience, but in my experience, I've never done a cold call really, unless
Mhm.
I've worked with that client a whole bunch. Like, I have like a really good relationship with Adult Swim, And so sometimes, and I've done this like 3 times now, I'll just come to them with a bumper idea and I'm like, I really want to do this bumper. And a lot of times, most of the time, they're just like, because I've done like 8 for them now.
Yeah.
They'll just be like, yeah, okay. What if we slotted this in for like an August release? And I'm like, cool. And then, we go from there. But we
Beautiful.
have a very long relationship, for me to be able to do this. I've tried cold calling before where, I'll, contact, I don't know, Nike.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I have an idea, and I've heard some people get some stuff from that. I personally never have.
Mhm.
Most of the time you're invited to pitch or they are seeking you out. You don't necessarily have to pitch to get the job. You
Yeah.
just have to pitch a couple ideas. It's like you already have the job, but you have to
Mhm.
figure out what exactly you're going to do. I've had that a couple times. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah,
I feel like I
absolutely.
ask that after every question. I'm like, I'm
Nope.
going on, and I hope I answered.
You definitely answered the question. Definitely. For me, it's again getting more insight into the world of what you deal with on a daily basis. It's evolved so much in the last 15 years. On top of that, things have changed in the industry in the last 4 years, and we're now still trying to adjust. And again, it's just getting that insight that you have on the concept of pitching. And for me, that was absolutely wonderful. And I only have 2 short questions for you left. How do you feel about run? Actually, this is probably going to be a very important question. How do you feel about running your own studio now? You have your relationship with your clients. You have your partner that you're working with, and you have these past relationships, as you mentioned, at Adult Swim. How does it feel to have your own studio where you're making most of the decisions? I know you have to work with people, and it's across the board. How does that feel now that you're to that point?
Um, I like it. It's very interesting. If you knew me for many years and you're close to me, you would laugh at the fact that I'm doing this now because this was actually not my goal. um, uh, yeah, there was a big time in my life where I just wanted to be hired to animate, go into work and animate, and I did not want to run my own studio because I didn't want to stop being creative. And a lot of times, the examples that I had, I often feel like it's like, if the only examples you have in your life with romantic relationships are like bad relationships, you might struggle to see yourself in a healthy relationship. It's kind of the same with studios. I saw a lot of studios, and I was pretty close with a lot of the people running it. And so, we would have very real conversations about it. And, they liked running it, but they're not creative anymore. They're just a business owner. And a lot of them often reminisce about the times that they were creative, and didn't have all the problems of running a business. And I am not new to entrepreneurship. This is actually, we won't get into it, but non creatively, I started my own company prior to that. And ended up selling it when it got bigger. I know, yay. Um, and My dad is an entrepreneur, and my dad and I have a very interesting relationship. But I will give credit when credit is due. He is an insanely amazing business owner, and I have learned so much from him. And um, gosh, what an amazing example of a business owner who can treat his employees well and like do it right, not just build it to be the biggest money maker, although he was very successful in that, but actually have a heart and care about people in his business. And with these in mind, um, I don't know, like I just always saw studios absolutely fail the mark with that if you were running it.
Mm.
Um, but as I kind of progressed through the industry and got older and realized that um, I wanted to go back to directing, and my entire career was kind of set up to do that. To be quite frank, I had like a very long term. Again, I'm a person with plans.
Absolutely.
Like a long term 10-year plan. To get back into it. I didn't think I was going to own my own studio. I just thought I was going to go back to directing.
Mm.
But then, honestly, I met the studio, opened the portal, cannot sing their praises enough. They are like my family. Um, and they showed me another way, and that studios can exist that are for the greater good, like not just, I mean, like the greater good of, I don't know, sending a world message, not in that way. I mean the greater good of treating artists well and keeping the heart and the industry in a very healthy and good place. And when I moved to Portland and worked on my first feature, I was kind of like, I think this is the last studio, like big studio project that I want to be as an animator. And being very frustrated with the way that studios are run and the way that crews are paid and just run into the ground. And I was like, I've seen it. There's a better way. And so basically, I decided to start this studio, but my goal is different than I think, most other people who might, I'm not most other people, but like the bigger studios, it's like, they made their plan to have exponential growth and like do TV shows and be like employed like year round and like be big, like the next Disney or the next, I don't know, Titmouse or, whatever
Yeah.
it is. And I realized that for me to reach my goals, which are, my goals of Planet Super is to have enough work year round that I can hire on a W-2, which means full-time employee instead of
Hmm.
1099, which is a freelancer.
Hmm.
I want to hire my 5 friends who are basically, they are Planet Super full-time, and create a environment where they are paid well. They, feel like, they're taken care of. I can provide them health insurance and a place where they have a voice to be creative and make the stuff that they want to make, not just like, you know, this is what we're making and you are a factory and you do it. I want everyone to have creative say, like, like I said, like, if there's a project that comes along and some, like Jason, our DOP, director of photography, if he has an idea of like some lighting he really wants to do, or like, oh, what if we do this? Like, I want that. Like, I want us all, to do this and like garner our artistic abilities and dreams and aspiration. At the end of the day, like keep it fun. I refuse to have people work overtime unless they 100% agree to it and they will get paid. It will never, paid overtime. It will never be forced. Regular
Hmm.
hours, good pay. And that's about it. Um, and we're working to there, and I'm like, if I can make a difference for 5 artists and keep stop motion alive in some way, then I feel like that is what I really want to do. I don't need to make something that wins an Emmy or, the most beloved TV show that's ever done. I just want to make shit and have fun and be creative. If we end up doing something that, does really well, like great. But that's not the goal. It's not to get huge or own a whole warehouse and have a receptionist. And I would really like a payroll department.
Yeah.
I do. I would like that, but we do okay. So there's a lot of frustration. I mean, I like being an entrepreneur. I'm right and left brained. I
Hmm.
actually come from production.
Hmm.
So, all that stuff of running a studio and doing budgets and scheduling. I like people. As a leader, I feel like my goal is to just put awesome people together and give them a voice and encourage them to do so. I don't think it's necessarily to be like, just keep the train going and loudly yell at people to do, one idea that's already been set. Um, and, I like doing all that stuff. I do kind of feel like, you know, the there's a lot of stuff that is frustrating, like, trying to figure out, I don't know, in Oregon, we have this Francis.com thing, and I always feel like I'm doing the forms wrong. It's like all the back end stuff that
Hmm.
nobody tells you how to do it.
Yeah.
You just have to figure it out and hope you do it right. And, once in a while, they'll be like, oh, there's this new tax you have to pay that we didn't tell you about.
Yeah.
And if you don't pay it, you'll owe $500. And it just feels like the government won't tell me what I need to do as a business owner to just do it right.
Yeah.
And that's frustrating. But you know, you keep fucking around and finding out. And I haven't gotten in trouble yet, so I feel like I'm doing it. Yeah,
I
that's the not fun part. Everything
yeah.
else I kind of feel like is a little fun.
I appreciate your point of view on that. And I agree. The tax thing, the back end thing that they didn't teach us in school, nothing at all. All we received was, oh, by the way, you're going to have to learn about contracts. You're going to have to learn about licensing. And you should probably talk to a lawyer. What? Give me a class on that. Give me a class.
Yeah,
Literally, just give me 10 days on it, and we would have been prepared. And,
please.
and you know what? Thank you so much. We are well over time, and I apologize, but I want to thank you
Oh,
so
I
much
could talk
for
forever. It's not a problem. I'm
well, I
sorry.
absolutely appreciate. The one last thing I would like to ask, two things. Where can they find your work? What social media, website, wherever you want them to look at? I'll make sure that's in the description of this video when it gets posted. And what advice do you have to those who are trying to find their creative way?
Yeah. Okay. So you can find me at, we are redoing our website because it's a little glitchy right now, but it is up. It's planetsuperstudios.com. Not spelled weird. It's exactly what it is, planetsuperstudios.com. And then you can also find me on Instagram. Planet Super Studios also has an Instagram, but honestly, it's the same stuff I post because I have to do it all. So you can just follow me. I post more than our Planet Super one, and that is 10-second dates, 10 second, like SECOND and then DAY. It's because on television we average our quota is 10 seconds a day. So it was like, oh, I did a 10-second day. That's where that came from. A lot of people are like, why is your name that? And I'm like, I was in the middle of being a TV animator, and
Yeah.
10-second day was a regular thing we all said all the time. Um, and then advice for someone trying to find their creative way. That was the last question,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
I would say, oh gosh, there's so much. Um, what you said actually really resonated with me, which is like find what you like to do and really lean into that, and finding a way to make yourself invaluable. Um, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you are the best at, let's say it's editing that you love to do. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be the best editor, but maybe you're really good at organization and adhering to the organizational standards of that studio. Maybe also you have a great personality and people love working with you. That goes a long way. um Making friends, but make it be genuine. Like people can tell when you're just trying to network and like fake friend, to maybe like move up. Like just get to know people. Find what you're good at and what your strengths are and really lean into that. Whenever I started animating, I was known for being very, very fast. I wasn't the best
Mhm.
animator, but I was valuable because they knew they could hire me to get their second quotas up. And that got me hired for a while, until my skills started going up. And then, people started hiring me because I was like, a better character animator, who maybe could go fast if they asked me to. It's like certain things like that. But if you like it, honing in on those skills will never, not never, but most of the time it will not be a burden. You'll want to do it. And learn and expand, and you feel cooler and more powerful every time you can like do something that you weren't able to do before. And if you really like it, then it kind of feels like a video game where you're leveling up instead of like, okay, now I have to learn how to do weight and animation. Like instead of like seeing it as like I get to learn weight and practice that because I want to be able, my characters have weight because that's so fucking cool when they're, one looks heavy. Like, cool, I couldn't do that before. Like, it still feels cool. I don't know if, like, I feel like I say this after everything, but I'm like, I hope that answered the question. But yeah, something like that.
You answered it. It was great.
Great.
I really appreciate all of your insights in this, and I want to thank you again for being here. And we'll go ahead and we'll end this now. I know you're a very busy person, and we'll stop recording. And again, thank you so much. You're an inspiration to me, and I hope everybody that checks out your animation realizes that the creativity, the time that goes into not just running the studio, but just to get the idea on camera is just, it's just so time consuming. It's beautiful. And thank you again.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.